Hi everyone, Mature Simmer here. I wanted to delve into a mod that was very popular in FS19 and has made its return in FS22, but with a twist. So I've learned one thing, which was that what they call shuttle shift, or basically where you can use a key to just quickly toss your vehicle into reverse from forward and vice versa, is part of standard gameplay if you change a setting. So let me cover that. Now, it did take me probably 15 minutes, if not more, to try to figure this out. So to save you some time, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it. If you go into general settings here, this setting, direction change, defines if the vehicle direction change is automatically toggled or manually by pressing a button. By default, this is on automatic. Additionally, then the other setting that you may want to adjust is here in the keyboard controls, the change driving direction, which is under the vehicle driving heading. This is the key you press to go ahead and toggle it. To give you an example, I'm moving forward, I press the space bar and you can see it immediately flips it into reverse. So this is the feature that, if you recall, in FS19 you would have an arrow next to the speedometer gauge down at the bottom right of the screen that would show you which way you're going. So there's no visual indication other than now you can see the gears that you're in. So where we have 654 over here, that will change to negative numbers. Be aware that that is a capability that is not EV specific. So jumping into the mod itself, I spent a couple hours with this the other day working with it. So let's cover some of the basic new information that shows up because of this mod that you wouldn't have if you didn't have this mod loaded, that is similar to what you would have expected if you've used FS19 before. So we'll begin at the bottom underneath the speedometer. You can see there are weights of the vehicle both with and without the implement. So you can see it's 25 tons, total of 26.3 tons. If we then go up near the top of the screen, underneath the main bar that exists from the game with the time and the money, you see we have two additional sections, one labeled damage and painting and one labeled fuel. So this gives us the wear and the usage that we have on the equipment. So you can see the tractor, because I've driven to the shop and picked up this plow, has a little bit of wear on it, 1.5%, and the paint is 0.1%, so we're just starting to wear the paint a little bit, and the plow, because it's newer, because I just brought it from the shop to here, driving with it does put wear on an implement. It wasn't that it was in the ground or anything like that. Then in fuel, and I do apologize for those who may be colorblind, this mod does have a lot of colors in it, so I'm going to be referring to things that way, but I usually will go from top to bottom if you're unable to discern the colors. But what appears to be light green to me, where we've got 1481 and then 1490 is the fuel in the tractor, and then the def, which is in blue, is at 83 and 83. So we haven't used any def, but we've used about 9 liters of fuel going to and from the shop. Dropping back down around the speedometer layout, the little image with the wheels and the center axle gives us the differential lock that we used to have in FS19. And by the default layout, if I use Control 7, you can see my front differential can be turned on and off. It goes red and green. And these are right control 8 turns that rear differential off, and then right control 9 changes it from all-wheel drive to, I don't know if it's rear-wheel drive, but it basically changes your drive mode. So basically right control 7, 8, and 9 affect that setup. Now let's turn on the tractor, because it's a little easier to see some other things when we're doing that. So if we jump back up to the fuel window, you'll see we now have an additional line that shows up in white that is 8.6 liters per hour. That is the burn rate of what we're doing. So if I hit the gas, you can see it jumps up pretty substantially, into the 60 or 70 liters per hour while I'm under power. And then if I go back to idle, that drops down. Now on the speedometer, aside from the RPMs, on the right side we have the temperature. So we can see we're at 195 degrees, 196 degrees Fahrenheit. As the engine continues to run, it's warming up. So the part of EV that is the twist, that is the added capability, is they've added what I guess I'll call intelligent GPS feature into the tool. They call it Track Assistant. And so those two bars above the speedometer are new in FS22 and didn't exist before. If you use the right control and the numpad /, you'll get into the enhanced vehicle settings, and you can see they're specific in this case for the tractor. And there's things about a headland mode, and then how things will appear. We'll go into these in some detail. And so there's definitely some complexity here. And so, again, I spent, as I said, a couple hours playing with this just to get familiar with it so that you don't have to, frankly, so that you can benefit from my learning and go forward from there. So all of the features use things on the right side of the keyboard, basically the numpad or the home and the end keys. So if we use the right control and the end key, you'll see it went ahead and it basically snapped to a line. They suggest that you align to the edge of the field, and so you can see the steering wheel is now green, and then we also have 200 degrees as the direction. And you'll see you do have two numbers. You have the green 200 degrees, and then you have, right now what's flipping a little bit, there we go, now it's settled down, of 197.4 degrees. So the white number is the current heading of the tractor. 200 is what we're going to move to eventually. So the next thing you'll hit is control and number 2 on the keypad, and now you'll see something that appears pretty complicated. But what this is showing you at this point is you can see these tracks are numbered. So I'm in track 0, and there's a -1 and a -2 to the left of me, and a and a 1 and a 2 to the right of me. If I use control page up and control page down, I can actually rotate the track a degree at a time. If I use right control and right shift and page up and page down, I will move them in 45-degree increments. So you can see I'm just hitting page up, it's cycling through, now I'm back to in front of me. And if I use just right shift and page up, I'll do 90 degrees, page down is 90 degrees back the other way. So that used to be, I believe, the Alt and the End key that would move things, or at least in FSN it moves things. Alright, so you can see basically with adjusting to the edge of the field, and then basically you hit control and then the number pad 2 to basically recalculate the tracks, and then it basically repositions it, and then I hit right control and end to lock to the track. So you can see, there's a lot of green items. Again, I'm facing at 196.3 degrees. I'm going to be going at 195 degrees, so basically I rotated the track 5 degrees from the 200 that we started out at. The next thing we're going to go ahead and turn on before we begin moving is Headland Management, which is actually quite interesting. So I'm going to go back into the menu, which is the control and the / on the numpad. And up here at the top, I've got my headland settings, so it's nothing. And then I have a headland distance of the working with is what it defaults to. So these are the two defaults. So there's 3 modes for the headland mode. There's nothing, there's turnaround automatically, and there's disable cruise control. Then on the headland distance, you can set that to various levels. Because I've got some room at the end of these fields, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the working with to see what it does. But let's pop back out here, because you can also use control and the asterisk or the multiply key on the numpad, and that will toggle the headland mode too. So if you look at the upper right, you've got basically a green circle with a slash to it, which is the headland mode we're in, which is nothing. Now if I hit Control star, I now have a circle with basically a U-turn arrow in it, which is automatic turnaround. If I hit it again, it's the speedometer, the cruise control number that we have next to the 24 miles an hour in the speedometer with the line through it. That's disable cruise control, and now we're back to nothing. So we can cycle through those 3 modes. And then in addition, then that 9 meters next to the nothing, so I'm going to put this in automatic turnaround. That's telling us how far we'll turn over. And then the arrow with the line, and then the very tiny print next to it. As we drive, you'll start to see when we get close to the end of the field, it's going to start to count down the number of meters we're away from the edge. The number below that is the working width of the implement you're working with, so that's 9 meters. So that gives you that information as well. Similar to what you need to do in something like course play, where you have an auto width, the control and the 1 on the numpad will recalculate the working width if you need to do that, if you feel it's off. So if we move over then to the left side, we've got some of the features we haven't specifically talked about. So we've got the steering wheel is basically snap the driving direction, and then the lane that is also green is basically snap to track. So we have both of those enabled at this point. And that again is that control end. So you'll see now I'm not enabled. Now if I hit control end, I'm enabled. When we didn't have tracks, it wasn't snapping to the track. The feature that's really interesting is the one below that. So once again, we have numbered tracks here. So we can see 0 to the left, -1, -2, to the right, 1 and 2. There's some changes you can make there. So let's go into the menu again. And so you can see number of visible tracks. I've taken that from 5 to 9. So if I now go ahead and come back out here, you can see I have 4 tracks to the left, 4 tracks to the right. You can go through that in odd numbers, and you can see you can do it simply from 1 all the way up to 9. So 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 are your choices. The default is 5. So I'm going to increase this to 7, just so we see a little bit more. And so now we've got 3 on each side plus the 1 in the center. So again, just, you're always going to have an odd number. And so you can see in that bottom left of those 2 bars, it says number sign 0, and then it shows an arrow to +1, and then 1. So what that is telling us is when it automatically turns around, it's going to move over 1 track in the positive direction. So it's telling us basically I'm going to go from 0 +1, and I will then be in track 1. If you use the control number pad 4 and control number pad 6, you adjust that. So now you can see I can skip 2 tracks. I can skip 3, 4, 5, and that's my max. So I could say I'm going up the field, and now I'm going to move 5 tracks over, and so I will go from track 0 to track 5, which I can't even see on this screen. And then consequently, if I go the other way, I now have negatives. So now I'm stepping 2 to the left. So I would go from 0 to -2, and then to -4, and then to -3. And you can see, it's easier to see with the field now, like I've gone one more step with the control 4, you can see the -3 is green compared to the other numbers being yellow. So it very clearly indicates to you where you're going to move to on the tracking. So we're going to go ahead and just leave this as a 1-to-1. And at this point, I'm going to lower down the implement, and I'm going to start moving. And so you'll see now that white number has vanished because now it has snapped me to the 195 degrees. You can see the number 1 is in green in track 1. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and hit Control 6 and make that a movement of 2 tracks, because this is where kind of I think you get to see something a little more intriguing than simply moving over one. The key difference here versus something like Courseplay is the creators are very clear in the text when you're downloading this from sites I've seen that this is a very rough version of turnaround. This does not have any intelligence in it. It's not going to avoid obstacles. It's not going to go forward and back. It's just going to take as straight a path as it can and make that turn. So, and it doesn't lift the implement up or take it off out of the ground. So I was testing this with a harvester and harvesting a field. It continues to cut and continues to harvest as you go along. So you can see now we're at the headland and it's turned around, and as you saw, the plow didn't come up, but it moved me over to track 2. We now see track 4 is green. And and in the bottom left, you can see it now says we're in number 2. We're going to go +2, which will put us in track 4. So you've got multiple ways to see what's happening. So the last piece then, I'm going to let this run to the end of the field here, and we'll watch it turn around. But keep an eye on the arrow and the straight line as we get closer to the end of the field, and you'll start to see the active headland distance start appearing. And I believe it shows up around 75 or 90 meters away is what I was seeing. But we're getting to that point, so let's kind of keep an eye on it and take a look. There you go, 95. So it's really probably 100. So you can see now the little green numbers. We're at 71.5, 67. So we're ticking down to how far away we are. And then, now we're, kind of in the yellow, we're in the red, and now we're turning around. And so because we're at the working with, and because we're kind of at a straighter edge, that worked a little cleaner. It got us to the end, and basically what you're trying to do, I'm going to take this out of driving at this point, is you're trying to make sure that your location is appropriate for the work you want to be doing. So once again, it's by default it's the working with, but you can now go 0 meters before end of field, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think through 10 it goes in ones. Once you get beyond 10, then it does 2 meters at a time up to 20. And the maximum then you can do is 20 meters before the end of the field. Or obviously the working width, if the working width is larger, I assume, I haven't tried with anything larger than 20 meters, then it would do something different. But, you can basically play with it and adjust it. So I would say this track assistant is a little bit of a simplified version of something like Courseplay, and it may be something that you want to give a try with. So I did like seeing a lot of this added capability here, because it's just something that obviously they did not have an enhanced vehicle before. So we can see as we're looking through and things running, it works as it's done before. Our temperatures around 195, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Up at the top, our damage has gone up, on the tractor, both in the damage in the paint. Same thing with the plow. And that I'm sure is just driven by the game to some degree. Eevee's just giving you a nice way to get that reported rather than simply have the bar near the wrench giving you information. So you can see we've got a yellow distance, then it goes to red. Now again, it's going to do a turn, and because this isn't a straight edge, it behaves maybe differently than you want. But you can see when it turns, like it's got that little cutout. Things aren't going to work as cleanly just because it's a very rough turn, so you're likely going to have to touch things up here and there. But this gives you a lot of that added capability. Again, I can hit the space bar and immediately throw it into reverse, which is not an EV capability, but now is in base game that I showed in the beginning. But with all that functionality, we now have EV back, but with the added ability of this track assist. So the other piece you can do is you can do hide lines automatically and turn that on, and basically I think that what we will see is now I'm going to lock to the track, and then I'm going to go ahead, and then I think in 5 seconds, there we go, they go away. So you can do that if you'd like. And so you can also adjust some of those controls where you're snapping the driving angle. By default it's at 10. And then the rest of these are just where things are positioned. So right now, it's in the top right. It's, classic FS19, where basically now it's right above the implement as we had. And then whether you have damage values on, is it % damage or % left, whether fuel values are on or off, whether you see the RPMs or not, whether you see the engine temperature, and whether you see the weights or not. So in this case, if we turn that off, you'll see that bar is gone from below the speedometer. Then there's some, more complicated settings, including even resetting the mod configuration, which will just set all these settings back, or reload the mod, because there are some things that you'll see in the file, and I'm not going to get into here, that you can adjust in the XML themselves that can't be adjusted in the interface on the fly. So you can also see you can change the type of lines, where you can have no lines, tracks only, which is what the default is, vehicle plus working with only, or all. So we'll go ahead and do all, and so you can see we've got kind of these red items. And at this point, because the working with and the track is the same, which is what you'd normally be using in most cases, I believe, they kind of overlap each other. But if I set it to vehicle plus working with only, you can see now I've just got kind of those red lines with the little vertical lines going up, and then obviously the white line showing me what the vehicle is locked to. And then again, obviously tracks only gives me that track that we had. So hopefully this gives you enough of an exposure to EV in its present format to determine if it's something you want to utilize or not. And it's definitely got some interesting features. What I did find, if you've got barriers at the edge, you're going to want to adjust that headland management, because with the harvester, I was off the field before it started to turn, and I think that might be because the header is in front of the vehicle versus behind it. So it's definitely something that takes a little bit of playing, but you can adjust things, and as I'm sure you can see, it's pretty powerful in its capability, especially with the track assistant. So I hope you enjoyed this review / tutorial, and please subscribe. Please if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like so that it gets some more visibility and more recommendations around YouTube, and comment below. Let me know what you're thinking, and definitely enjoy having a conversation with you. And thank you for spending your time with me, and I'll see you next time.